Let's take a trip to Salem, Oregon, and check out the Oregon State Hospital. This isn't just any regular hospital, it's a place that's made a big mark in mental health history. Plus, it's super famous for being in the movie One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Why did this hospital end up in such a major film? Well, it's always been ahead of its time in mental health care, doing things differently and setting trends. Think about this. The hospital opened its doors way back in 1862.
The founding of this hospital, historically, was using moral therapy. It came from France, a faith-based, very simple philosophy. Human beings are human beings are human beings, period. And that we as human beings suffer from many things, and people who are suffering from mental illness, addiction, whatever, are people in need. And we have a responsibility to help care for them. And then that's a core thinking. This is in the 1700s, 1800s. What do people who are suffering need that we can provide? Look at this out here. Beauty.
It was built with Dr. Thomas Kirkbride's ideas of moral therapy in mind, aiming to give patients a calm and healing space, which was a huge shift from the rough treatments back then.
Being in nature, real fresh air, sunlight, meaningful work, people were able to work, meaningful community, the people who worked here, lived here, and in these hospitals.
They also jumped on board with occupational therapy pretty early, which was a perfect fit for their approach to patient care.
I went to the State Archives building and I found these pictures. And at first I thought, okay, it's the basket and sewing room, and I was kind of interested because I've been in the rehab department. But then I started looking closer, and if you look closer, you can start seeing maybe these folks might look a little different. Like, she looks very Native American to me. These all look very Native. And then I started looking at the patterns on the baskets and the blankets and pillows. Clearly Native American local. So why in 1915 is there a room full of natives making baskets and blankets at the state hospital was kind of the question. So this is like the beginning therapy back in the day. So this is about 1915, 1912-ish, between 12 and 15. And there is a little bit more maybe distressing history of how these natives got here. But once they were here, they actually turned a profit with their basketry and anything in the sewing room, and helped run the hospital. They sewed clothing for people from other cultures, people from around the world. They actually sold these products to the community and helped fund the hospital. So very interesting. And then we had the chairwoman of the Siletz tribe, which is a local tribe. She toured through one day and she said, this is clearly a Siletz tribe basket pattern. So here, we had it right here, we didn't even realize, and it's all tied together.
But it's not all been smooth sailing. The hospital had its rough patches, like when it got involved in the eugenics movement in 1923, which wasn't their proudest moment.
This is an example of an old operating table that might have been. This is, the kind of table you can readjust it to do whatever you wanted. The majority of the things that were done here were things like, standard, appendectomies. We had childbirth here frequently. There were lobotomies done, but not after the early 1950s probably. And sterilization, unfortunately, was part of it. In the women's exhibit, we talk about forced sterilization of some women, which was done if they were perceived to be like developmentally delayed. Woman might be sterilized, as would a woman who had a mental illness who had already had children and was continuing to have children. That might be a scenario. It wasn't fair, wasn't a good idea, but it was done. We didn't do that anymore. An exam chair, like you might see in your dentist's office or your ear, nose, and throat doctor's office. Somebody asked, well, that looks like a torture chair. And I'm going, it's an exam chair. This one actually is a chair where you used to draw blood. And then over here is the old ECT machine. Electroshock therapy was done to try to get people out of severe depression, including psychotic depression, so people with schizophrenia who got very depressed, this would work in. And it works. Today, we still use it. It's a little harder to get done on this coast. It's easier on the East Coast because they have embraced it a little better. But it is the fastest, safest way to get somebody out of a severe depression or even a catatonic state. I've actually personally seen with my own patients somebody who was not talking, eating, or doing anything for themselves, having their first treatment, coming back and going, I want my breakfast now. It's like that quick, even though it does take a series. Very safe, very well done now with anesthesia. A lot of people always have questions about how, oh, isn't that awful? No. This is what the campus looked like when we were children. I was born in 1949. This is what it looked like. And we grew up in one of these cottages here on the grounds. There were 3,600 patients in this hospital. There would be 100 patients on one ward in these long dormitories. We had 2 state farms where our produce, our milk, our eggs, the patients all worked on the farms. The whole hospital was staffed by patients. We had staff, we had doctors and nurses and aides and everything else you can think of, but most of the ongoing function of the hospital were patients having, as she said, meaningful jobs. We had a clothing shop, we had shoe shop, we had people working to build furniture, we had housekeeping, groundskeeping, etc. I mean, every job that this hospital needed to run, patients were involved in. So that was that sense of community, that wraparound moral therapy that you were talking about earlier. I started working here as a volunteer when I was 12. Now remember, we'd been taken on the units as babies and kids and intermingling, because my father's idea of going to dinner out was to bring us up to the cafeteria and joining the line with the patients and everybody else eating. But I started working here at age 12 on the wards as a junior volunteer. I was assigned under recreational therapy. So we did everything from helping put on parties to doing fingernails for the female patients to actually doing patient care. We would go over and do bed baths and help feed and so forth, and all of that. We also got to go on all the outings with the patients. Every ward got to go on a picnic at least once a summer, and we'd load them all up on buses and go to Fogarty Creek or up to Detroit and have picnics.
Fast forward to the 60s, and Ken Kesey's One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest comes out. People started buzzing, wondering if this hospital was the real deal behind the book's vivid descriptions.
When the book came out, Dean started getting calls from all over the country. Dean, I read this book about your hospital. And he was like, what are you talking about? And he said, they were saying, oh, this book, and it's wonderful. And so he got it, read it, and hated it.
Yeah.
He totally missed the point. He was
Initially.
defensive until Dale Wasserman's play was done, and he went down to the University of Oregon with our other sister, India, on Parents' Day or Father's Day weekend, and saw the play, and he got it. He got it. He completely got it. Milos was adamant that this had nothing to do with California Hollywood film studio. He wanted people to be immersed in the project. And so it would be real. I needed real. Amazing guy. So, they went looking all over the nation for hospitals, and what happened to them was that they never got past the letter N in no. No one would consider it except Dean Brooks, my dad. His process was, okay, yeah, this would be cool, but I have to talk with the patients. So he went to each and every ward in this hospital at the time, sat down with the patients and staff and said, here's these people, they want to come do this thing. And patients had one question: do I get to meet Michael Douglas? And the answer was yes. So the patients were, yeah, we want to do this. There were a number of doctors who raised incredibly relevant concerns about a circus atmosphere, negative betrayal of mental illness.
My only concern was how much would it disturb the functioning of my particular area of the hospital.
I thought filming a movie like this in the campus would be like a circus. Luckily, I had a good relationship with him. I could tell him this thing, Dr. Brooks.
They all ended up supporting, and they were actually in the film. Milos particularly, but Saul as well, and Michael had a vision. And they had a vision not just of what the movie was and its outcome, but they had a vision about the process. And they were determined to be immersed here at this hospital with the patients in a wide variety of ways. They wanted this respectful. They wanted the people here to have a sense that their story was being told as well. What they did, and what we did, and what was part of my little job as a location coordinator, we hired 90 patients. 90. And they were paid, the majority of them were all behind the scenes. And you people come from the film industry. You know the labor unions. They all waved a blind eye, and these people were paid.
I was scared to death because I thought, well, here's these movie stars, and all I am is just a little patient.
And come to find out that they weren't out there and I wasn't down here. We were just kind of, on an even plane.
I worked with electricians. Mainly I just moved stuff in, up, set it up, take stuff off the truck.
I just felt part of the family, part of this Cuckoo's Nest family.
I think that the patients were thrilled to have the movie here. We had many of them who wanted to work on the film, and I think we had something like 89 on the payroll, either in the crew or working as extras in some of the scenes. I insisted that in no way would we ever do anything that would denigrate a patient. They gave me that word, and they kept that.
The actors particularly, and Michael as well, volunteered their time, what little there is. This is an industry that's pretty intense in terms of the hours and whatnot, but they were very generous with their time. Michael knew, his popularity and whatnot. He did have keys to the wards that would have been locked, and he made rounds himself and spent time with the patients. After the film was done, he came back a couple of times to see people and make a connection.
It was an important memory in my life. It totally changed my life, both professionally and understanding a little about mental health.
They were committed to having a premiere for the patients and staff of this hospital. So they came, and no one knew they were coming. I mean, we did, but no one in the audience knew that they were coming. And Milos and Jack and Michael, I don't remember, I think Louise may have come too. They had sweaty palms. They were so nervous about this showing because that's how much they respected the work that was being done and the importance of recognizing people. They were out in the lobby behind the curtains and whatnot in the lobby, but they could hear what was going on, and it was pretty obvious from the beginning that this was an audience like none other, because the patients were invested in this filmmaking, even if they didn't have anything to do with it. But as they recognized people, wow, look at that, that's it. And clap and boo and cheer and whatnot. And these guys calmed down because they realized that this was their vision and their dream, that this would be cherished by the population. Dean was vilified by psychiatry.
Why?
Oh yeah, nationally. Accused of setting mental health care back 25 years by having this film done. And, which isn't true, but there are still people who believe that. And one of them was the president of the American Psychiatric Association until just a few years ago. What he did was he took the film to the American Psychiatric Association the next year in '76, and he gave a talk before showing this film. And in there, I'll try to get the quote to you, but in there, he really challenges the audience and said that the importance of fiction, all fiction, is that it helps for us to bring into consciousness that which we refuse to look at. And that's why the film was threatening, he suggested to the audience, and then showed the film. My dad did not seek the role of Spivvy, and he was over the years talked to, people would introduce him when he would be giving talks about this film. And you played yourself in the movie. I most certainly did not. That man he was a wimp. He did everything she wanted. That's not who I am. But we need to know about who he was.
As we hit the 2000s, people started noticing the old hospital was showing its age. A newspaper investigation in 2004 put the spotlight on issues like overcrowding and outdated facilities, and people were calling for change. By 2012, a brand new hospital was up and running. They mostly tore down the old main building but kept the front part to preserve a link to the past. And here's an interesting fact: in 2012, the entire hospital campus was listed on the National Register of Historic Places. Plus, they opened the Museum of Mental Health.
When we did the opening, we had a couple of documentarians who had worked on documentaries about the hospital and Cuckoo's Nest, and Louise and Antoine, and it was a panel discussion sharing the experience, but also answering personal questions. And when it got to the Q&A of this thing that happened, a gala before we opened the next day, there were about 450 people, and one of the questions to the panel was, well, hey, yeah, but do any of you have personal experience with, in your family with mental illness? And she just grabbed the microphone. She said, well, let's see, alcoholism, suicide, depression, bipolar, the typical American family. And that was so important as a way to kick off the opening of this museum, because that is the one statistic that we ask people to take away. And that is that only 100% of us, period, have mental illness and addiction in our families, and our heart families. And I've had, every time I have given that statistic, everyone nods. I had one person, 6th grade boy, nope, you're wrong. I said, okay, how do you see it? He said, it is 110%. It's been our real honor to have people that are here. I mean, we've got people that come from all over the world to do all sorts of things. The film, in the beginning, my estimate was that was probably 70% of the people that were coming were because of the film. But even today, I mean, out of the first 4 people that came, all 4 of them came because of Cuckoo's Nest. And that was Dean's vision, that this film allowed people to begin conversations that we need to have. And it's doing it.
Back in the day, even when I first came here in '86, the police officers still had a choice between taking them to jail and booking them for their whatever crime, or if they perceived or thought this person was having a mental health issue, they could bring them here and say, I want to put this person on a police officer hold, which was like for a 3-day hold. We get to evaluate them. And usually at the end of it, a lot of patients would sign themselves in. Otherwise, we would have them civilly committed if they were truly a danger to themselves or others. Now, that whole crowd is being shifted to the jails, which is why we're seeing so much in the jails. And to me, that's a tragedy. You know, and I heard her talking about the community side, and again, that has not been brought up to the level that it needs to be in any way, shape, or form, in my opinion. But that's just my opinion.
You can see a couple of decisions over time that is so typical of how we address our problems. A question of work, deep concern, genuine concern, I think, on the part of legislature, et cetera, about exploitation of patients. Is that possible in that environment where everyone worked? Yes. Was that the dominant experience? No. But the decision was no more work. You can ask the patient nothing of the patient except making their bed. And otherwise you pay them the state wage. So overnight people lost, and in this culture, serious loss of identity and worth. Great motive, unintended consequence, scum. The other decision we have made, right motive, people coming in, committing crimes, misdemeanors, serious crimes, the idea that not just they need to be in jail, but that there might be other extenuating circumstances and concern for that, that's great. But we make this law, within 7 days of the arrest, they have to be in this hospital, which is like intensive care. It's like, hey, you stubbed your toe, you're in intensive care. No, but that's the law, that's the papers. You see continuously this organization is court, because to have this kind of flow from the good intention of recognizing there's more to a crime than, if that makes sense. So we got to look at this.
We've really tied our hands in a really odd way because, you know, we downsize, downsize, downsize. So we have, what, about 500 beds on this campus, like give or take, and about 200 in Junction City. 3,600 when we were kids, and that did not include Eastern Oregon State Hospital. I mean, so, and the population of Oregon has not gone down, and I'm going to tell you that the mental illness rate has definitely not gone down. Serious mental illness is existing, and in the Denny's comment about the ICU, that was how I used to view this hospital. I mean, you didn't get here unless you were really seriously ill and needed this level of care. It's ICU psychiatry to come to here, and that's in the 90s and the 2000s. So now we're back to, I don't know what we're going to do with this. It makes me sad to see this, because it's something that our father, and of course Danny and I and everybody else who's been around here has done all their lives. So it's hard. And I don't know how to fix it. So we're looking at the younger generation to do it. So we don't know how to fix that.
I'm not pleased with many of the changes, and some of these changes have occurred because of our population has changed, and I think Ulista was talking earlier about some of that. So we have what are called our 370 population, these are folks that are coming in sent here because they've committed some sort of crime, but they aren't able to help their lawyer to defend themselves. So they're here to be evaluated and hopefully rehab to the point where they can defend themselves. That changes our culture dramatically, because in the past we would have a lot of people that were civilly committed, and they would be committed for up to 180 days, so that's a fairly lengthy stay, and sometimes they would be here a lot longer if the judge thought they needed it. And then there's also a population of PSRB clients, which stands for the Psychiatric Security Review Board, and these are folks that have been determined to have committed a crime, but they were not of sound mind at the time. Some of those folks can be committed for years. And so our population has changed to a much shorter term folks compared to what we had in the past. So that makes a big difference. And we were talking about community, so that really does change the sense of community that we can get, because people aren't here very long. So, and still do a little bit of community-based therapy. So right now I'm doing a group where I take people out and we go hiking in nature. In the past, not too many years ago, we could go out all day. Nowadays we're more restricted. We can go within 35 miles of this institution. We have a pretty extensive offering of different therapies. So we have, and I'll probably miss a few, but we have occupational therapists. We've talked about recreation therapy, which is what I used to do. We have music therapists, art therapists. We have mental health counselors. We have the vocational rehab, which we talked about. We have a very strong peer support program, and those folks do amazing work. And we have, of course, psychologists. And the idea is that we try to help people connect with something that they're passionate about. So, and as a recreation therapist, that was like awesome for my job. I wasn't in a specific focus. I could expand. So if somebody was really interested in animals, so I could, help that person get connected with animals. I did do a animal assist therapy program for a while. So I would bring dogs into the hospital, and people would just, some people just like dogs better than humans. A lot of people in this institution that I don't believe need to be here. So we're as taxpayers, we're paying a lot of money and putting a lot of our resources into this institution. So I don't like seeing people that are living here that don't need to be here. That's not right. And so the solution in my mind is to create better resources in the community, whether housing would be a big one. So we have a limit on the kind of housing that these people would go to after being in this institution. So we just don't have enough beds. There's other resources. I mean, we talked about vocational rehab and that's important for a lot of people. Not everybody, but it's important. And then from my perspective as a recreation therapist, being able to connect with something that a person's passionate about that keeps them healthy, whether it's walking their dog every day in the park or going down to the local community center to connect with people, So finding those the supports and the resources for that, I think would be a big help as far as getting people out of this institution. JFK's idea of community-based help for people, and I think that was solid. Unfortunately, the funding didn't happen for political reasons.
So here's the thing, Oregon State Hospital is way more than just a place to get treatment. Through all its ups and downs, Oregon State Hospital has consistently been a critical player in the conversations about psychiatry. From being pioneers in moral therapy to shaping today's mental health discussions, this hospital's journey is a testament to the ever-evolving journey of psychiatric care.